inner mental state.
Okay, so we'll slow down a little bit here, and we'll try and sort of pull this apart just to make sure everybody's following along. There is a sort of sense in which there is a me, right? Like this is why people have been motivated to come up with like mind-body dualism and things like this, and sort of debate it till the cow come home, because it feels like there is this thing called me, which is not quite the same thing as like, you know, my hands or physical matter and the clothes that I'm wearing and stuff. There's like this me somewhere. But just for the materialist as well, like there is some sense in which I just am this collection of atoms. You know, I just am the collection of atoms that's in my brain and my body. And it sounds like you want to say that's kind of true, but in the opposite direction, where like the materialist says you have a bunch of matter, and that just somehow is the same thing as this conscious experience. If I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying you are just this conscious experience, you are just this like mentality. It's just that if you look at that from the outside, it just looks like a brain, it just looks like a person. And so it's not that you have this brain activity and it's mysteriously correlated with experience. Why is this neuron firing correlated with the experience of red? You're also not saying that, well, the brain activity just like is the experience of red. It's that the brain activity is what the experience of red looks like from the outside. From the inside, it looks like red. But from the
Yes.
outside, it looks like a neuron firing, something like that.
Yes, exactly right. There is only ever inner experience, except that I can have an inner experience that correlates with your inner experience. And to me, your inner experience appears as the body of Alex. With our
I think this is a bit of a stretch, right? He has no foundation to say this, other than he can just say it without being scrutinized, because nobody has access to whatever makes whatever mental state look like that from another point of view. No, it's why do you need five senses then in order to get to a mental state? Or are you using all five senses, so to say? And there's some parts missing in this story he's creating here. It's just too convenient to say that what you experience is what I experience when I experience Alex O'Connor, the figure, right? So when you think about pizzas, that's why you have a nose, something like that. Something to that standard, right? That's just very, very far-fetched, in my opinion. So in this fashion, he's actually trying to circumvent the problem of other minds. It's like if somebody looks sad in order to in accordance with his standards, there must be some kind of sadness mental state inside that thing that he has interpreted as being sad, right? I don't think that's a reasonable argument, because it's about interpretations. And what about the transition from that external noumena object to his boundary and into his mindness, his dissociation, as he'll probably call it later? There's just shit missing here, right? Not least missing, but at the beginning, there is no foundational argument for why he thinks there is an external world. He can do it as I do it by saying, I'm going with the idea that there is. My philosophy is based on the axiom that there is an external world. That's fine, because then he says, I'm doing it. He's not saying you have to do it, or it's sort of given to everybody, or it just follows from out of the blue or something, right? It's just, I think there's also people are struggling to understand his philosophy, but then they think that because he has 2 PhDs, it must be because they're stupid and he's smart, right? So they keep coming back and listening and trying to get a grasp, get a grip on his presentations, right? And he has basically repeated what he's saying here the last 10 years. He's just saying the same thing over and over and over and over again. I know it's in different interviews and so on, but there might be a little problem in your philosophy somewhere, since people keep asking about this. It's not kind of obvious to anybody, right? And that's kind of a sign to me that we are in fabulation land, right?
Arms, legs, mouth, nose, and the movements of Alex's body. So there are only ever mental states. This is the most parsimonious hypothesis, metaphysical hypothesis there can be. Of course, we have been
So you might wonder if Kastrup says that a body is the extrinsic appearance of interesting mental states. I'm probably paraphrasing a bit, right? This fancy language. Then is his own body then an intrinsic appearance of an extrinsic appearance of an intrinsic appearance? Can he say, when he looks in the mirror, I'm thinking about pizza, and that is why this picture looks like this, for instance? Can he do that? But if he can't do that, why can he do it with Alex O'Connor? I mean, I'm just asking, if he looks at his own body, is that an intrinsic appearance of an extrinsic appearance of an interesting mental state? It's an intrinsic appearance of an extrinsic appearance of an intrinsic mental state. Can that new mental state that is based on the extrinsic appearance in the mirror be correlated with another intrinsic? Because isn't he creating a double, right? Isn't he creating another intrinsic appearance that then might be manifested in the mirror, and then he has to do this loop again and again and again and again and again? I mean, it's fucking stupid, man, right? But it's just because it's so convoluted and so fluffy that it's hard to spot the errors. I have a strong sense there's shit wrong with this philosophy, and I think I've done a good work, and also in prior videos, to pinpoint the problems, right? So, but yeah,
culturally indoctrinated into attributing intuitiveness to the notion that there is this fundamental separation between mental states and physical states, even though all we can ever know by direct acquaintance when it comes to physical states.
No, but it's when you try to juggle too many balls at the same time, you're going to fuck it up, right? Unless you are absolutely a juggler of state-of-the-art juggler, right? These discussions are usually derailed from the beginning because there's no understanding that no starting point, and terms are thrown left and right, and people, what do you mean by that? But I mean this. Okay, but I think it means this. No, but there's some book I read that where it means this, and it is just like, who cares, right? It's the. I've seen so many videos on philosophy now, and I guess I'm a kind of a stupid, crazy. Keep doing this in the hope that somebody might actually be able to present a coherent set of arguments, to present a coherent philosophy. I'm still searching. I'm the only one I've found so far. And if you want to take a look at my philosophy, there's a link down below. Complete philosophy from A to Z, right? From reduction base to a moral principle, right? Everything. So everything that is needed to get from that A to Z, right? You can probably, philosophize about other stuff, obviously, but this is sort of the important aspects, right? It covers all the traditional bases like existence, knowledge, truth, and so on, objectivity, moral principle, you name it, right?
Are the qualities of physical states as they appear on the screen of perception, the stuff you see, hear, touch, taste, smell, and so forth. Um, I am not a dualist. I think dualism has some fundamental problems, like the interaction problem. If matter and mind are fundamentally different, then it shouldn't be possible for them to interact because they pertain to.
No, but I have pointed this out in a video that is, I think, about a year old now, something like that, right? Where I pinpoint that both matter and mind are abstractions of some kind. So no matter how you throw around mind and matter, you're never going to get anywhere, because neither of them are fundamental, right? I don't need matter and mind in my philosophy to create a complete philosophy, because they're abstractions. They're abstractions from prior experiences, right? Nobody experienced matter. Somebody came up with the idea of matter, and my prediction or my suggestion would be that it's because of observations about how they behave concerning gravitational movement, right? Or what is considered gravitation. That if you drop this thing, it moves. If you drop that thing, it moves, and they all move the same way. Give and take a little, air resistance and whatever, right? So the conclusion might be there's something about each of these objects that are vastly different in appearance that makes them do the same shit. So they might be made of the same shit, might be made of the same stuff. Let me call that matter, right? So, and matter is usually something you can touch with your hands, like a tree and a bicycle and so on. Your grandmother, you can throw it from it. Don't be nice to grandmothers, right? It's more like mother-in-laws. I'm not so keen about those, right? But so somebody came up with the idea of matter because they behave similarly in gravitational on the surface of Earth, right? So it's an abstraction based on observations, but these observations were prior to the idea of matter, right? And what about mind? What is it? Does it have a color? Does mind have a color? Have you experienced mind? I have not. Does it have a sound? I have never heard of mind, right? A taste, a touch, and a smell? None of these. Have you smelled mind or tasted mind? No. If it has none of these, it's not primary. It's not fundamental, right? It's another abstraction based on ideas. It's like I categorize the idea of mind in the same vein as you could understand the idea of mammal, right? Or France, as I've used as example before. France doesn't exist. There are lakes and stones and Eiffel Towers and, Pot de Feu or what? Baguette. Strange cheeses. But there's no France anywhere, right? Like there's no society anywhere. These are abstractions. These are abstract ideas. So no wonder people can't get a grasp on the mind-matter problem, because there is no problem to solve. These are both abstractions that are not fundamental. And they keep talking about this. And that goes for consciousness also, right? It's trying to force your abstractions into being fundamental. They're not.
Two completely disjoint ontological domains, right? And dualism says that they are fundamentally different, but they do interact. Oh, I see that as a contradiction. And even if it is
but I would say that the mind matter or the body mind problem or whatever you want to call it these days, right? That ends up becoming the hard problem in one way or another, is based on naive. It arises because of naive realism. So it's you have to deal with naive realism and understand the problems there in that thinking. the inside-outside dichotomy and the problem of or the pitfalls of that kind of dichotomy. So if you, in that dichotomy, become a naive realist, you run into all these problems that, the interaction problem and all this, right? Mind, body, and heart problem, and so on, right? It's because of bad metaphysics. And I understand that Bernardo Kastrup has pointed this out earlier, that it is because of bad metaphysics. Or it's a bad treatment of the idea of an inside and outside dichotomy, right?
Principle tenable, I think dualism is unnecessary. It's not parsimonious. It's inflationary. We don't need another kind of state beyond mental states to make sense of the world. We just have to understand that there are mental states I have direct access to; those are my own, and mental states I only have indirect access to, mediated by the screen of perception. But the contents of my screen of perception are also mental states that represent.
Yeah, intermediated, but it is again this, you're taking this external world for granted, right? I would say you always have to argue well for everything in your philosophy, as well as you can, right? And that to a level that satisfy you and to your standards. But it's almost like the deeper and more foundational the aspect of that philosophy is, the more important it is it's well argued. And it's like when we come to the absolute foundation, the inside-outside dichotomy, it's just like, of course, there's this dichotomy. How? You can't just take a dichotomy for granted. You have to point out why you do it, right?
And other mental states out there to which I have no direct access. This is enough. So I wouldn't go down the avenue of dualism. It may be a more intuitive step because of our religious history and so forth, but I don't think it's ultimately helpful. I think we should bite the bullet and sort of get our thinking going in a coherent line, as opposed to sort of conceding too much.
Well, Descartes, when he sort of proposes his famous formulation of mind-body dualism, the idea that these are like separate substances, is motivated by the thought that these seem in principle to be separable. Like, I can imagine myself existing without my body. I can just kind of imagine being like this sort of abstractly existing consciousness, personhood somewhere in the ether with no hands, no brain, no anything. I can imagine that. I can also obviously imagine like a body that's not conscious, like a corpse or something. So at least conceptually, these two things seem to be distinct. And if they're distinct concepts, that gives us some good reason to think that they are like distinct things, even if they happen to sort of overlap in a really serious way. So I've got to say, like, that makes sense to me as a thought, right? Like, I feel like I can imagine myself without a brain, and I'm a little bit confused as to whether you would be able to imagine yourself without a brain. So I just wonder what you thought about that.
Completely. Totally. I can imagine that. So it is conceivable, but conceivability is not sufficient to pronounce something as a viable or plausible hypothesis. Look, I will acknowledge this. There is a lazy, not rigorous, incoherent line of thought according to which this separation between mind and matter makes sense. I will acknowledge that. But that's not what we are talking about. We are talking about disciplined reasoning guided by logic and empirical evidence. We can do better.
Oh, empirical evidence. Oh, so yeah, you might need empirical evidence some way down the line of your philosophy, at a later stage of philosophy, but not when you're doing metaphysics, right? So what he basically says, using logic, I don't think I'm using logic when I'm doing my philosophy. I'm reasoning from my experiences, but that isn't necessarily logic, right? And there's a lot of logic I think is bullshit, to be honest, right? When you really analyze it, what people are doing when they're supposedly doing logic. But one thing's for sure, you're not using evidence. You're not using empiricism or anything like that to get to a, I mean, how could you possibly do that? And if you can do that, point out to me what it is about this experience of yours that makes you say there must be something external. What is it? What color is it? What sound is it? What taste is it? What touch or what smell is it? I can't see it, right? I just think that the dogma of the external world is so engraved in his mentality that it's sort of irreconcilable. What's it called? It's he can't challenge it. He's not even. I don't know, because it does that sometimes. At times, sound like he's actually trying very, rookily to argue for an external world, or understand that there needs to be some kind of indication why he's going with it. But what the arguments are basically so ridiculous that it's hard to call them arguments. They're just basically saying, I'm just doing this because I'm doing it, right? So where is that argument for that external world? I keep saying this because nobody has presented it. And neither have I, because you can't, in my opinion. There's nothing about your experience that says there must be something outside my experience. There's nothing that says that.
Then just go with whatever sounds more intuitive to our culturally indoctrinated mindset, right? We can do better than that. That's what philosophy is all about.
I think the reason that I asked that is because, I mean, you say that, a person, or at least a brain, I'm not entirely clear on this, is what, like, a mental state looks like from the outside. And what I'm saying is, if you can imagine you existing without a brain, like in that, I'm not saying that's actually how the world really is, but just step into that possible world for a moment where you exist, but you have no brain or physical body of any kind. What does that look like in that possible?
I don't exist, but if there's an I, there's existence. I exist then, right? There's an I that has these experiences. So you're jumping out into an external world that you haven't clarified and looking at yourself from the outside and imagining shit. It just becomes very, it becomes so abstract, this foundational philosophy. It's never going to fly, this. Never in a fucking million years, right?
Possible world, somebody who looks at you without the brain, if in the real world the brain is just what you look like.
Yeah.
That's why I was confused as to whether you would be able to imagine such a thing, because
can
maybe you
imagine.
think that you just are what a sort of brain presents itself to other people.
Not only can we imagine it, we can actually experience something very close to it. If you put yourself in the best sensory deprivation tank you can buy, flotation tank.
Well, it's not on my to-do list. Spending money on a sensory deprivation chamber. Has anybody does that? Has anybody ever done that? Yeah, because there's still shit going on, right? I mean, you might fall asleep and then you have a dream and so on. I mean, yeah, there's some baseline shit going on. But what you're removing are basically just the qualia. Everything else, your memory is there, and your desires are there, and your whatever, your hunger and so on, it's still there, right? So I don't. It sounds like kind of a, I don't know, straw man maybe, right? It just rubs me the wrong way, this kind of argumentation about this that he has done before, this sensory deprivation. So there's a baseline subjectivity, and that's what it is. It's the unexcited mindness, right?
And you go into it, and it's almost perfectly dark, almost perfectly silent, and you're floating in high salinity water, so you don't have the sense of touch either, or the weight. You don't have any sense of texture. Yeah, there is no smell. There is no flavor. You are essentially just your endogenous inner life. There is no perceptual stimulus triggering anything in the screen of perception. So there is no matter in that state. There is only thought, emotion, imagination, fantasy, intuition, reasoning, abstraction, but there is no extension, there is no salty or sweet, there is no weight, there is no texture, there is no color, there's no melody, none of that. So that is what you're asking for. You imagine yourself in a world that is devoid of perception. Is there anything left? Oh, of course, it's your entire inner life. It's the things that matter most to you, your memories, your thoughts, your opinions, your views, your imagination, your dreams, your fears, all of that is still there. Now, if somebody else
Hmm.
were to enter that sensory deprivation chamber with a, 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 a night vision scope, that inner life of yours would appear to that person as a humanoid body floating in salt water. So this is the most parsimonious, and it's eminently.
But I don't understand this argument. If I don't have any, I still have intrinsic. But would if as I become less and less sensory, does the look of my body change? Because there must be fewer of these mental states he's referring to. But if I was looking at that thing in that chamber, would it change as these supposed inner states disappear because the qualia disappears? How would you do that? It's like it's a fable. This is a fable. This is not philosophy, in my opinion. It's a fabulation about some external events that he has no business fabulating about, in my opinion.
The coherent hypothesis about what's going on. There are only mental states. And of course, there are boundaries, how those mental states sort of cohere together to form mental complexes.
Okay, so now all of a sudden, now of course they are separated into little mind bubbles here and there, and they coalesce into. So he started building a cell structure of mind cells rather than matter cells, right? To avoid a hard problem. So he gets what he wants. He just take everything that people called matter before and say now it's just mind everything. That's basically the story. He keeps everything else basically, right? And he then brings in this magical membrane called dissociation that keeps parts of this mental, this universal mentality separate. And you are one of these separated membranes called dissociations, right? It's just grabbed out of his ass, basically. There's no all this appeal to logic and evidence and so on is just bullshit, right? There's no evidence for this, right? You must have direct experience, right? But what he relies on is somebody else's supposed scientific whatever. Well, you can't do that when you're doing metaphysics. You have to settle all your metaphysics if you want to do metaphysics. I don't, right? And ontology, in order to define what you mean by science, but he just grabs whatever science he wants to justify whatever he wants in his so-called external world, right?
This coherence of certain mental states together to form complexes define boundaries, what is outside and inside that mental complex. Now, my body seems to form the boundaries of a mental complex I call Bernardo Kastrup. Because if you stick a needle in my arm, I feel it. But if you stick a needle in the arm of my chair, I don't feel it. It's beyond that boundary. The mechanisms for boundary formation, we have a very good theory. It's a good starting point for it. And that's integrated information theory. It tells us how mental states will sort of.
But I don't care about theories. You can't bring in theories when you're doing metaphysics or ontology. Theories are science. You can't use a theory to establish anything. As you say, it's a convenient fiction, right? And then there's the next convenient fiction and the next convenient fiction. That's not philosophy. Philosophy tells you how you get to do convenient fictions and what you're using to create these convenient fictions, which is the foundations, the reduction base, the ontology, and potentially metaphysics and knowledge, right? I would suppose, and even objectivity, maybe. You can't use theories in metaphysics and ontology. It's moronically stupid, right?
Link together to maximize integrated information. And if you keep on linking more and more and more, actually you maximize information integration by shedding off parts of your empire. When the empire grows too big, when the mental complex grows too big, it forms fault lines. You integrate more information by separating stuff from you. That stuff becomes the external world, which is not part of your complex, but impinges on your complex, and therefore appears to you as what we call matter or physicality. There is a very, very
No, it doesn't appear to me as matter. Matter is another abstraction, right? It appears to me as glasses and iPhones, right? This is not matter. This is an iPhone. You might say, yeah, but if you drop it and it falls to earth, it will move the same way as something else that is also some kind of object, right? And therefore, we have decided that it might be made of matter. All of it, all of them, right? But I'm not experiencing matter. I'm experiencing iPhone through some qualia, right? He can't understand this, right? And if he can't understand this, he will forever be completely lost in abstraction. And it's never going to fly, this. Never.
Simonius, empirically consistent thought line that leads to this. Now, the argument against it, well, but it's not intuitive to me. Well, yeah, okay, sorry. Sorry that, because, philosophy is about thinking right, not thinking in a culture-bound manner. We know today, we think very arrogantly about our ancestors as having been deluded about a great many things. Let me give you an example. Hundreds of years ago, there was this theory called effluvium. Effluvium was supposed to be an elastic, invisible, completely transparent fluid that
it's just a convenient fiction. One of these convenient fiction. It's not sufficiently convenient when people find flaws in it, and they create an improved version of that convenient fiction that is more in alignment with observations. That's how you do science, right?
that would connect, say, an amber bar to wheat chaff. And chaff would be attracted to the amber bar because effluvium, that elastic, invisible substance, would pull the chaff to the amber bar. So that was an explanation for electromagnetic attraction. Of course, it couldn't explain electromagnetic repulsion, but this was a very, very serious idea. Complete.
Why was it serious? What do you mean it was serious? No, it's just that, yeah. Newton was a serious idea. Yeah, I suppose many people, it was functional until Einstein improved it. But you can still do, all this lingo shit, right? Get to some good philosophy, man.
Completely coherent with the empirical evidence that amber rods attract chaff. But that doesn't mean that because it was intuitive to the people then, that it is the best convenient fiction to adopt.
Well, you never know what the best convenient fiction is. It can always be improved, right? But you can't improve a metaphysics by observation for obvious reasons, right? Because your observations is on your inside, so to say, if you're dealing with an inside-outside dichotomy. So no matter how much you look at that experience of yours, it is never going to tell you if there is an external world and what that might be made up of and how it works. Never. Right?
Let alone the best metaphysics to adopt.
Yeah, I think it's also worth pointing out that, like, basically every view that somebody can encounter to explain consciousness will have some kind of unintuitive element to it. Like when I speak to materialist physicalists about consciousness views like panpsychism or idealism of any kind, they say, I just sort of can't imagine that like an electron is like a mental state or has consciousness or something. And I'm like, yeah, but you know how difficult it is also to imagine that you've.
Well, if you by mental state mean something like a phenomena, well, it is a phenomena because it's an abstraction, right? It's an idea, it's a model, right? A little ball or some kind of extended field or whatever, right? These are all abstractions. These are ideas. You're not experiencing electrons. And another thing is where somebody might say, oh, yeah, but we have created microscopes that can sort of see electrons and they lie there like little balls or whatever it is, right? Yeah, but I don't really take that too seriously because these instruments are created by human beings that have some kind of expectation about what you are supposed to see when you get a particular signal. So they're going to create an instrument that shows you what you want to see in a way, right? So in my opinion, and even then, what you're looking at on some computer screen is still not the electron. It's some kind of conjured up presentation of some kind of signal that you have converted into a picture that looks like something, right? So you can't get to it no matter how much you try.
Got a bunch of inert, dead matter, and if you just like arrange it in the right way, you just like get, the taste of Coca-Cola just by like putting like bricks together. It's like that's also extremely unintuitive. We've just kind of forgotten how unintuitive it is
It's
because
magic.
we've
It's
just sort of
magic.
swallowed it wholesale, right? So I think
Yeah.
it's fair to say that intuition is at best a limited guide here. But there are some questions which loom, right? Like I find it really interesting the idea that what what we experience as the physical world is just how mentality appears from the outside, right? But there is this strange problem of like personhood, right? Like there's me and there's you. And not only that, but it's not like I'm looking at this sort of singular like point. If you appeared to me as like a point in space or even like a little orb or something, but okay, maybe that's just what Bernardo Kastrup looks like from the outside. But I can kind of look at my own hands, and there's a sense in which they're a part of me, but a sense in which they're kind of not. Like I feel like I could cut off my hand and yeah, I'd feel it and it would like hurt. So it's kind of part of me in that respect, but it's not a part of me in that if you cut it off and got rid of it, I'd feel like, there's less Alex O'Connor. There's less of, my physical body, but there's not less of me in a way that I feel like if you, lobotomized half of my brain, there'd probably be less of like my personality. It seems like that's kind of important to my personhood. It gets a little bit confusing, like where to sort of draw this boundary in the same way, like how we.
You suffer from naive realism, Alex O'Connor. You need to challenge your understanding of this inside-outside dichotomy, right? If you say your hand is outside your mind, right? If you say your mind is inside your skull, and maybe your brain is inside your skull and your mind is inside your brain, right? But it's inside your skull. And you say your hand is outside your skull. Well, if you have to experience it, right, then that experience must be inside your skull. It can't be out here, right? Because this is outside your skull. It's outside my skull. Well, let's say you're me, right? In the same fashion as I'm sitting here. So this hand can't be outside my skull. It just can't. Because I wouldn't experience it because it's outside. But then if it's inside, what is this outside dichotomy I have created? Where is it? Because all of that which I experience must be in there. What is the other thing? And how did I get to that if it's not an experience? Because if it needs to be inside my skull in order to be an experience, this can't be an experience. But then what the hell is it? No, the other way to say, well, everything is an experience. All of it is inside. And if I'm dealing with something outside, that's something that I brought to the table through some kind of dogma or something I've gotten used to do, right? And at that point, you need to say, okay, how the hell do I get to that external world if I want it? Because I have just rejected it, right?
You know, you could say, well, because you can feel it, it's in some sense a part of you. But like, I can feel my skin, right? But of course, over time, my skin sheds, you know, it becomes the dust in the air. And if all of it's just kind of made up of mentality, like whose mentality is that? Like, is it a part of me? Is it
Yeah,
not a part of me? And when it disappears, like how many of me are there? And am I all across the universe? You know what I mean? Like, how do we begin sort of like approaching this question
yeah,
on your
yeah.
worldview?
I think you're on to.
Yeah, another thing is I need to eat some other dissociations in order to survive, apparently, right? It's not good enough just what I was dissociated with from the beginning. I need to grow, apparently, and I need to shove some other, dissociation into me, and it comes out some kind of brownish entity, some kind of brownish dissociation that I don't need, right? Apparently, right? And how about sex? Why do two dissociations need to copulate in order to create another dissociation? What is it? You want some of my dissociation, honey bunny, right? Oh my God, he's running into so many problems here.
Something that is important. I can even make it worse. We don't feel our appendix unless it's
Yeah.
infected, right?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
about
right.
what about your kidneys?
Yeah.
Is there something it is like to be your kidneys? What about your
Oh,
liver?
Bernardo, deal with the question. When he loses his skin, right? Is there is a lot of, Alex O'Connor and Bernardo Kastrup flowing out there that is expendable parts of your dissociation or what?
Your left big toe. You can wiggle it, but most of the times you're not conscious of your left big toe from the inside, right?
Mhm.
Um, Look, to say that everything is made of mental states is the beginning of the journey. The next step in the journey is to figure out how those mental states arrange themselves in different mental complexes. You can think of a complex as a.
Yeah, and this is where he's the ability to just come up with what you want to fit the bill, because he's dealing with some aspects that is outside anybody's experience, so he can conjure up whatever he needs to explain anything. And this is the sort of the woo-woo aspect of his philosophy. All metaphysics becomes woo-woo, right? It's just, well, I create, but it could be explained this way, and I have this theory, and who cares? Right?
Graph, graph theory in math, where you have these
Not really,
vertices
no.
that are connected by edges, depending on how information flows or how causality flows between them. You can create a graph of mental states that are sort of in a causal network. They influence
Mhm.
one another causally. They can influence each other's state.
Oh, they can so what are we doing now, right? So let's get into abstract, even more abstractions, game theory, and oh my God. So if I lose a toenail, I'm losing a part of my dissociation, ain't I? So how much of that dissociation can I lose? Well, you can lose all that, which still makes sense, right? So he just it's basically useless, right? I always back up a bit and say, okay, when people come with all their fancy ideas about metaphysics and whatever, right? They say, what do I need when I stand down in the grocery store, right? Let's say I'm moved to a new place and I enter this grocery store for the first time. I don't know where everything is, and it's a new place I've never seen before. It's not one of the main chains of supermarkets, right? Okay, but then I'm trying to locate shit, right? Not shit, but locate various objects I want to locate. why would I need a metaphysics for doing that? Why do I need game theory and mental states and information integration shit and so on and so on? No, I need to look for some objects, right? And how I deal with these objects is infinitely more important than your crazy ideas of what goes on beyond my experiences. It's just useless. Because at the end of the day, you're still coming back to me and say, yeah, and it still looks like a can of tomatoes. Well, okay, you just create an elaborate story that just comes back to basics. That is, that there are cans of tomatoes and there are elephants and bicycles, right? And then you have to deal with your tomatoes and your bicycle. Well, I already did that before you created this crazy elaborate metaphysics, right? I don't need this shit.
A graph of mental states with a causal structure is what we call a mental complex. Now, this word complex has been in psychology since the 19th century. All this stuff about graph and information theory, that's the new stuff that IIT has brought into it. But it's new instrumentation of a very old, well understood notion, mental complexes. Now, the boundaries of this complex are the boundaries of a sort of innate sense of identity, because there is something it is like to be.
Why are you not answering the question? Why is the dissociation called Alex O'Connor shedding his skin? What is happening there? Is he losing a part of his dissociation or what? And if you can't observe correctly his inner states from external state impressions in your inner states or whatever, right? If he sheds his light or his skin, or he loses an arm, and it's sort of there's a hole in the dissociation or what? No, of course you want to not answer it because it's a stupid philosophy, right?
Be a complex, but there isn't anything it is like to be individual mental states in that complex. For instance, I have a holistic experience of the monitor in front of me, of the feeling of my skin touching the chair.
Is it what do you mean in front of you? So yeah, in front of the body that is also a part of your inner experience, right? So be careful. It's this alluding to an external world just by saying I'm looking at it, right? It's sort of embedded in the language. I know it's sort of, this is the everyday way of saying things, and I used to do that also because language is limited, and it's basically language is meant for naive realism, not foundational philosophy, right?
That is supporting me, the colors I see in front of me, the smell in the air, the texture of my clothes, all of that is part of one complex. There is nothing it is like for Bernardo to feel the texture of my clothes and not be seeing you right now. These states subsume together into an integrated state. This is all integrated information theory. The temptation is to say that therefore Bernardo and Alex are only one complex. But there is no necessity here. Bernardo and Alex are sets of complexes. The complex that I identify with myself is the ego complex. But there are obviously many other complexes in this great web that appears to the outside as my body. So for you, there are the memories we are not evoking, the feelings we repress.
So he has basically, in my opinion, not answered the last couple of questions. Why can I lose a part? Why can I lose my hand and still feel that I'm complete? Right? So is this sort of unconscious mental states that you can feel, you can have a mental state about you losing it, you can't have the loss of a mental state called your foot, while an external one like Bernardo Kastrup can see the missing foot and create some kind of understanding of that through a mental state. That sounds a little weird, doesn't it? And if you cut up a foot, haven't you destroyed the dissociation? Isn't there a hole in the dissociation? And what is this dissociation thing? Is some kind of membrane or what? Because if everything is the same thing, when does it become something that does something different? If it's all the same, called mind. So it's this. He wants to have his cake and eat it too, right? He wants to create all sorts of little, okay, yeah, there's something special going on over here, and there's some special game theory over here, and there's a set of membranes and sets and sets and sets of membrane and theories about information and so on. But if you ask me questions, yeah, it's all mind, right? Have your cake and eat it too, yeah. Bad philosophy.
The traumas we forgot, the wishes we deny,
Oh my God, this is for the
all
ladies,
this
right?
stuff
This is
that
for the ladies.
psychology in the 19th century would call the unconscious. It is not unconscious. It's unconscious from the perspective of the ego, because it's a different complex. The ego has no direct access to the other complexes that are going on within the great collective that each one of us is. But each of those other complexes are conscious from their own perspective. There is something it is like to be them. So
Yeah, but why doesn't he lose a part of his me because he loses a foot? Because if it's a part of that set of mental states, he must be losing a mental state. There must be, he must feel something missing. And can you just get rid of these mental states as you see fit, because it needs to fit the story or you're creating, and then you're creating just there. Yeah, but you don't need this foot. You don't need the foot, right? Sort of, it just becomes this elaborate fable that just basically returns to what you started with, right? It's absolutely useless. Completely useless, right? I don't need mind or matter or game theory, information identification theory, or what the fuck it's called, right? Or an idea of mental states or metaphysics and dissociations in order to fucking find a banana, right? I need to experience and I need to move and grab the banana, right? That's what I need to do.
think of us as a sort of the passengers in a bus, and the ego complex is the driver. The executive ego, it controls the body, makes choices. But there is a lot more going on in our inner mental lives, some of which sometimes appear in dreams, in
But I mean,
neuroses, when
again,
you're depressed.
our mental life, there's no our mental life, there's your mental life, right? I'm going to work from the idea that when I experience you, there is actually something similar outside myself that is actually Bernardo Kastrup, and I have some kind of qualia here that is sort of inside me, right? And I'm saying, okay, that's a representation of something outside that claims this, that, and the other, but I can't say we. In fact, to be strict about it, I can only say I, because I is what I have, and they say that also, but it's this lumping everything into a we, right? So at least you have to clarify that there are some axioms embedded in that statement, the we statement. There's an external world and all sorts of shit you take for granted when you say we, right? These kinds of embedded taking shit for granted are usually not clarified by Bernardo Kastrup. He takes all sorts of shit for granted, right?
Or in phases of great upheaval, when we realize, oh my God, I have been feeling like this forever. I just didn't know, right?
Again, there is a knowledge of a feeling now, right? Feelings can be known, apparently. I re-listened to one of my earlier parts in the series, and I also use the term no. So it just flies off the handle sometimes, right? Because it's ordinary language. But if I say no in any other context than addressing a proposition, and the proposition in the sense that I have defined it, links down below, follow my philosophy, right? Then I don't mean it as no, but it's just a bad habit, right? I'm trying to get rid of.
So your left big toe, your liver, your kidneys, they are the extrinsic appearances of other complexes that your ego cannot directly access. So they too appear to the ego as matter. Or sometimes you can directly access them because you've touched your left big toe, but
Okay, so now he's sort of clouding it all in complexity. Yeah, but there's some ego dissociation inside your dissociation that is not in contact with your toe dissociation, even though they are connected through this game theory. And give me a fucking break, man, right?
there is this gray area in which information integration is not complete as in a single
Right.
complete.
So like from the outside, it looks like a big toe. From the inside.
Okay, let's stop here and take the rest in the next part. Please share, like, and subscribe. Leave a comment. What do you think about this? My reaction and in general about Alex O'Connor and Bernardo Kastrup and their kind, mostly Bernardo Kastrup, I would say, right? Alex O'Connor is not as deeply philosophical as Bernardo Kastrup might actually be, and maybe myself included, right? But he's decently good at asking hard questions, I would say. So shout out to him, right, for doing this interview, right? So, or beyond that, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.